On your knees, now!
Officer, I'm a federal official. My credentials are in my don't-know house.
Shut your mouth! Sir, if you just let me knees, you deaf boy?
A black man in full military dress uniform and forces him down onto the hot asphalt of a grocery store parking lot. Metals scrape against the ground. The officer slaps him across the face. The sound cracks through the still morning air. That uniform doesn't belong to you. You people don't serve. You steal. The black man says nothing. He breathes. He stays still. His jaw tightens, but his eyes stay calm. That officer just made the worst mistake of his career, because in 30 minutes, federal agents would surround his entire police station. Let me take you back to the beginning, before the slap, before the sirens, before the whole country learned his name. Byron Underwood woke up early that Saturday morning in Granton, Virginia, a small town, population just over 22,000, the kind of place where everybody knows everybody, where front porches still have rocking chairs and the barbershop closes at noon. Byron grew up here, rode his bike down these streets, got his first job bagging groceries at the same store he'd visit later that day. But Byron didn't stay small. He joined the Army right out of high school, rose through the ranks, became a lieutenant colonel, served 2 combat tours in Afghanistan, led men and women through firefights, ambushes, and missions most people only see in movies. After 20 years of military service, he retired with a chest full of medals and a reputation made of steel. But Byron wasn't done serving. He joined the United States Department of Justice, climbed again, and now, at 45 years old, he held the title of Deputy Inspector General, one of the highest oversight positions in American law enforcement. His job was simple on paper, terrifying in practice. He investigated misconduct, corruption, abuse of power. When cops or federal agents broke the law, Byron's office came knocking. But this weekend wasn't about work. Byron came home to honor a friend, Sergeant First Class Terrence Williams, a brother-in-arms who didn't make it back from Kandahar. The memorial service was that afternoon, so Byron put on his Army dress uniform, the Class A's. Every ribbon, every medal, polished shoes, sharp creases. He wore it out of love, out of respect. That morning, his wife Denise called from Washington. She was an attorney, sharp mind, warm heart. "Don't let that small town turn you country again," she teased. He laughed. "Too late. Mama already made biscuits." He stopped by the local grocery store, picked up flowers for his mother, some fruit, a bottle of sweet tea. Simple things. A quiet morning. Nothing about this day was supposed to make headlines. Now let me tell you about the other side of this story. Officer Derek Swanson had been with the Granton Police Department for 12 years. 12 years of pulling people over. 12 years of writing reports. And 12 years of complaints. 6 formal complaints from black residents, all dismissed after internal review. Every single one marked unfounded. Swanson sat in his cruiser that morning at a gas station across from the grocery store. His partner, Officer Trent Holloway, sat in the passenger seat. Younger, quieter, the kind of man who never starts trouble but never stops it either. Swanson watched Byron walk out of the store in his dress uniform, medals shining, bags in both hands. And something in Swanson's face changed. His jaw tightened, his eyes narrowed. "Look at this clown playing soldier," he muttered. He pulled the cruiser out of the gas station and followed. And just like that, 2 paths collided in a sunlit parking lot. One man carried flowers for his mother. The other carried 12 years of unchecked power. Granton, Virginia was about to change forever. Byron placed the grocery bags in the back of his black Chevy Tahoe. Government plates. A small detail that would matter later. He set the flowers gently on the passenger seat. White lilies, his mother's favorite. He could already picture her face when she saw them. That soft smile, those warm eyes. He closed the door and reached for his keys. That's when the flashing lights hit. Red and blue splashed across the side of the SUV like a warning painted in light. A police cruiser pulled up directly behind him. Close, too close, blocking him completely. The engine idled loud and heavy. The radio crackled with bursts of static that cut through the quiet morning air. Byron turned slowly. He kept his hands visible, loose at his sides, palms facing outward. This wasn't his first encounter with law enforcement, and not because he'd ever broken the law, because he was a black man in America. He knew the unwritten rules. Stay calm, move slow, speak clearly. Don't give them a reason. Don't give them an excuse. Officer Derek Swanson stepped out of the cruiser. He didn't walk toward Byron. He strutted, chest puffed, sunglasses on, one hand resting on his belt near the holster, the other pointing straight at Byron's chest like a weapon of its own. "Step away from the vehicle. Hands where I can see them." No greeting, no explanation, no sir, no good morning. Just a command, hard and loud. Like Byron was already guilty of something. Byron raised both hands slowly, palms open, fingers spread. "Good morning, officer. My name is Byron Underwood. I'm happy to cooperate. Can I ask what this is about?" Swanson didn't answer the question. He walked closer. His boots crunched on the loose gravel. Each step is deliberate. Each step is louder than the last. He stopped 2 feet from Byron and looked him up and down. Not at the medals, not at the rank insignia on his shoulders, not at the combat patches on his sleeve. He looked at Byron's face, at his skin. And something in Swanson's expression shifted. His lip curled just slightly, his chin lifted. "Got a report of a suspicious vehicle in this lot." There was no report, no dispatch call, no 911 complaint, no concerned citizen. Swanson made it up on the spot, fabricated it out of thin air like it was nothing. But Byron didn't know that yet, so he responded the way any reasonable person would. "This is my vehicle, officer, registered in my name. I'm visiting family this weekend. I just picked up some groceries." Swanson tilted his head. His eyes drifted down to the uniform, the pressed jacket, the row of ribbons, the gleaming medals, and something twisted in his expression. Not curiosity, not respect, not even suspicion. Disgust. Pure, undisguised disgust. "What's with the outfit?" "It's my Army dress uniform, officer. I'm attending a memorial service this afternoon for a fallen soldier who—" "Where'd you get it? A thrift store? A costume shop? Maybe eBay?" The words landed like stones. Byron felt them in his chest, heavy and sharp. But he held it. He'd been trained to hold far worse, in combat, in high-level negotiations, in classified briefings where one wrong word could cost lives. If he could stay composed with bullets flying overhead in Kandahar, he could stay composed here. "I served 20 years in the United States Army, officer. Retired as a lieutenant colonel. This uniform is real. Every medal on my chest was earned in service to this country." Swanson stepped even closer, so close that Byron could smell the stale coffee on his breath, could see the tiny veins in his reddened eyes. Swanson reached out with one finger and flicked the bronze star pinned to Byron's chest. The medal swung and clinked against the others. A small, careless sound, but it echoed across that parking lot like a gunshot. "Earned," Swanson repeated slowly. He let the word hang in the hot air like it was the punchline to a bad joke. "Right, sure you did." Officer Holloway stood behind the cruiser door, arms folded across his chest, face completely blank. He said nothing, did nothing. His body camera was recording. The small red light blinked steadily on his chest like a heartbeat. But Holloway just watched, like a statue, like a man who had practiced the art of looking the other way. Byron kept his voice level, steady as a heartbeat. "Officer, I'd like to show you my identification. I am a federal official with the United States Department of Justice. My credentials are inside my jacket pocket. I am going to reach for them slowly." He lowered his right hand a few inches, just a few, slowly and carefully, telegraphing every movement like his life depended on it. Because it might have. That small movement was all it took. Swanson's hand shot out. He grabbed Byron's wrist and slapped his hand away, hard. The sound was sharp and sudden, skin cracking against skin. Byron's arm jerked sideways. Pain flashed through his wrist. "Did I say you could move? Did I give you permission to reach for anything?" "Officer, I'm trying to identify myself so we can resolve." "I don't care who you say you are. I've heard every story in the book. Every guy I pull over is a lawyer, a senator, a general. You're no different." Swanson grabbed Byron by the shoulder. His thick fingers dug into the fabric of the dress uniform. He spun Byron around and shoved him face first against the hood of the Tahoe. Byron's chest hit the metal with a dull thud. His metals pressed flat against the scorching surface. The sun had been beating down on that black hood all morning. The heat burned through his jacket, through his shirt, into his skin. "Hands on the hood.
Spread your legs.
Don't move. Don't speak unless I tell you to speak." Byron complied, slowly, deliberately. Every movement was controlled. Every breath is measured. He pressed his palms flat on the burning hood and felt the heat sear into his hands. "Officer, I want to state clearly that I am fully cooperating. I have committed no crime. I am requesting your name and badge number." Swanson leaned in close. His mouth was inches from Byron's ear. His voice dropped to a whisper, the kind of whisper that isn't quiet at all, the kind meant to humiliate. "You don't get to make requests. You don't have rights until I say you do. I'm the law here, not you, not your little medals, not your costume, me." Across the parking lot, the world was watching. A young mother clutched her daughter's hand and pulled her toward their car. The little girl looked back over her shoulder with wide, confused eyes. An elderly man in a flannel shirt stood frozen by the shopping cart return. His mouth hung open. His coffee trembled in his hand. A teenage boy sitting in a parked sedan lifted his phone and pressed record. His hands were shaking so badly the footage would come out unsteady, but it would come out clear enough. And on the far side of the lot, a man in a gray suit stepped out of a dark blue sedan. Pastor Elijah Moore, 63 years old, community leader, a man who had baptized half the children in Granton and buried too many of its young men. He recognized Byron the moment he saw him. Same street, same neighborhood, same Sunday dinners 30 years ago. Pastor Moore reached into his breast pocket, pulled out his phone, and pressed the record without a word. Back at the SUV, Swanson patted Byron down. Not like a professional conducting a lawful search, like a man making a point. He squeezed Byron's shoulders roughly, yanked at his pockets, pulled out a leather wallet and tossed it onto the hood without opening it. It slid across the hot metal and nearly fell off the edge. Then he found Byron's cell phone and slammed it down beside the wallet. "What else have you got on you? Weapons, drugs, anything I should know about?" "No, sir. I have nothing illegal on my person." "We'll see about that. We'll see." Swanson straightened up. He turned to Holloway and raised his voice, loud enough for the whole parking lot to hear, loud enough for every phone recording to capture. "Call it in. I need backup units. This one's being difficult." Difficult. Byron hadn't raised his voice once, hadn't moved out of compliance, hadn't clenched a fist, hadn't made a single aggressive gesture. But Swanson called him difficult. And that word, that one small word, carried enormous weight. In police reports, difficult justifies escalation. Difficult justifies force. Difficult turns a victim into a suspect with 3 syllables. Within 5 minutes, 2 more patrol cars rolled into the parking lot. Lights flashing, no sirens, tires crunching on gravel. 4 officers total now, all white. They stepped out and formed a loose half-circle behind Swanson. None of them asked Byron a single question. None of them looked at his medals. They just took their positions like soldiers following orders. One of the arriving officers, younger, maybe late 20s, glanced at the uniform, glanced at the ribbons, then looked at Swanson and quietly asked, "What's the situation here?" Swanson didn't hesitate, didn't blink. "Suspicious individual, uncooperative, possibly impersonating military personnel. I'm handling it." Every word is a lie. Every word delivered with the casual confidence of a man who had never been questioned, never been held accountable, never once faced consequences for anything he said or did while wearing that badge. The other officers didn't push back, didn't verify, didn't check the plates. didn't ask for Byron's ID. They just nodded and stayed in formation. Byron closed his eyes for a brief moment. He felt the sun pressing on the back of his neck, heard the distant hum of traffic on the highway, smelled the hot asphalt beneath his polished shoes, felt his medals, still warm from the hood, pressing against his chest. He had faced enemy combatants in the mountains of Kandahar. He had walked through minefields in the dark. He had carried wounded soldiers through gunfire. He had held a dying man in his arms and whispered that everything would be okay even when it wouldn't. But standing in that parking lot, hands pressed flat against a burning hood, surrounded by 4 police officers in his own hometown, wearing the uniform he had bled and sacrificed for, Byron Underwood felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Not fear. He was past fear. Loneliness. The deep, heavy kind of loneliness that settles into your bones when your own country looks at you and sees a threat instead of a servant. When the uniform you wore into battle means nothing. When 20 years of service vanishes behind the color of your skin. Byron opened his eyes. He stared at his reflection in the dark hood of the SUV, and he waited. Because Byron Underwood was a patient man, and patience, in this case, would prove to be the most powerful weapon in that parking lot. What happened next crossed every legal line there is, and Swanson didn't just cross those lines, he sprinted past them like they didn't exist. "Pop the trunk," Swanson said. Not a request, an order. Byron stayed pressed against the hood. His voice was steady, clear, loud enough for every camera to hear. "Officer, I do not consent to a search of my vehicle. I am asserting my rights under the 4th Amendment of the United States Constitution." Swanson laughed. Not a chuckle, a full, open laugh. The kind meant to belittle, to shrink a man down to nothing. "4th Amendment. Listen to this guy. You hear that, Trent? We got ourselves a constitutional scholar." Holloway shifted on his feet. He didn't laugh, but he didn't speak up either. He just adjusted his body camera strap and looked at the ground. Swanson walked to the back of the Tahoe, tried the handle, locked. He turned back to Byron. "Give me the keys." "I do not consent to a search." "I'm not asking for your consent, I'm telling you, last chance." Byron said nothing, hands flat on the hood, breathing slow and controlled, in through the nose, out through the mouth, the way he'd trained soldiers to breathe when everything was falling apart around them. Swanson grabbed Byron's wallet from the hood, flipped it open, found the key fob inside, pressed unlock. The Tahoe chirped. Locks clicked open. He swung the rear door wide and started pulling things out. A garment bag, a leather duffel, running shoes. He tossed each item onto the asphalt like garbage. The garment bag landed in a puddle of oil-stained water. Byron heard the soft thud and felt his stomach tighten. Then Swanson opened the trunk fully, and there it was, a black leather briefcase. Department of Justice seal embossed in gold on the front. Combination lock, official government property. Swanson ran his thumb across the gold seal. For the first time, something flickered behind his eyes, a shadow of hesitation, but it closed as fast as it opened. He set the briefcase on the trunk ledge. "What's in here?" Byron turned his head slightly. His voice changed, still calm, but harder now, edged with steel. "That briefcase contains classified federal documents, property of the United States Department of Justice. Opening it without authorization is a federal crime. I am asking you, clearly and on the record, to put it down." The parking lot went silent. The teenager zoomed his camera in. Pastor Moore took 2 steps closer, phone held high. Swanson looked at the briefcase, looked at Byron. Then he made his choice. He pulled a flathead tool from his duty belt and jammed it into the combination lock. Metal scraped against metal, a grinding, ugly sound. He twisted, pried. The lock cracked open with a snap. Inside were 3 manila folders marked "Confidential" in red ink, a legal pad with handwritten notes, a secure laptop in a foam-lined compartment, and sitting right on top, in a clear plastic sleeve, an identification badge. A photo of Byron Underwood. Crisp, professional. Beside the photo, printed in bold navy letters, United States Department of Justice, Office of the Inspector General, Deputy Inspector General. Swanson stared at it. His fingers gripped the badge sleeve. Holloway stepped forward. His face was drained of color. All at once. "Derek." His voice was barely a whisper. "That's real. That's the DOJ." This was the fork in the road, the moment where a reasonable man would stop, step back, apologize, call his supervisor and pray the damage could be undone. Derek Swanson was not a reasonable man. He closed the briefcase, slid the badge back inside, turned to Holloway with a look that could freeze a river in July. "I don't care if he's the president. He fits the description. We're taking him in." Holloway opened his mouth, closed it, looked at the crowd, and stepped back to his position, back to silence. Swanson pulled his handcuffs from his belt. The metal clinked, cold and sharp against the warm air. "Turn around." Byron turned slowly, looked Swanson directly in the eyes, not with anger, not with hatred, with something far more unsettling: pity. "You are making a mistake you cannot undo, officer." Swanson grabbed his wrists and slapped the cuffs on. Too tight. Metal bit into skin. Byron felt the pinch, the cold steel pressing against bone. But his face didn't change. Not one muscle. Swanson marched him toward the cruiser, past the scattered groceries, past the crushed white lilies, flowers meant for his mother, now flattened under a boot print, past the teenager with the shaking phone, past Pastor Moore, who whispered just loud enough, "I got it all, son," every second. Byron nodded, a nod so small only Moore could see it. The cruiser door opened. Byron was pushed inside. His metals clinked against the metal cage. The door slammed shut, heavy, final. Through the cage, he watched the parking lot. His garment bag was soaking in oily water. His mother's flowers ground into asphalt. Holloway standing by the Tahoe staring at nothing. But Byron was not defeated. The officers made one critical mistake during their sloppy search. They took his wallet, his keys, opened his classified briefcase. But they never checked his uniform carefully enough. Tucked inside the inner breast pocket, right behind his heart, was his personal cell phone. The device Swanson slammed on the hood was his work phone. The personal one was still there. Hands cuffed behind him, Byron shifted his weight. His fingers found the phone through the fabric, pressed and held the side button through the cloth. 3 seconds. A long vibration confirmed it. Emergency protocol activated. A system designed for senior federal officials in duress. One long press sent an automated message to the DOJ Inspector General's Emergency Operations Desk. Byron's name, his GPS coordinates, a single code word meaning unlawful detention. The message hit Washington in 4 seconds flat. Byron leaned back. The vinyl seat was hot and cracked. The car smelled like sweat and old fast food. Through the window, he watched Swanson joking with the officers, laughing, relaxed, like just another Saturday. The cruiser pulled out, past the grocery store, past the gas station, past the American flag hanging limp on the post office flagpole. They brought Byron to Granton Police Department, a squat brick building on Main Street, faded blue sign, 2 flags out front. They walked him through the door in handcuffs, full dress uniform, medals still on his chest. Desk Sergeant Bill Dawson looked up. His coffee mug froze halfway to his lips. He stared at Byron, at the uniform, at the cuffs. "Derek, what is this?" "Book him. Resisting arrest. Obstruction." Dawson set his mug down. "He's in a military uniform." "I said book him." Byron met Dawson's eyes. "Sergeant, my name is Byron Underwood, Deputy Inspector General, United States Department of Justice. I have committed no crime. Everything today was recorded by multiple witnesses and at least 1 body camera. I suggest you proceed carefully." Swanson slammed his hand on the desk. "Book him now!" Dawson swallowed and began filling out the form. Byron was photographed, fingerprinted, processed, all in dress uniforms, all with medals pinned to his chest. Meanwhile, Chief Ray Cummings sat at home watching college football. His phone buzzed. Had a situation. Suspicious individual, resisted. Brought him in. Cummings didn't ask questions. Didn't ask about the uniform or the federal credentials. Fine, handle it. He hung up and turned back to the game. He had no idea that in 20 minutes his entire career would end. Because between Granton and Washington, a message was already moving. Calls were being made. Teams assembled. A convoy of black SUVs was heading south on Interstate 95 at very high speed. The clock was ticking, and Derek Swanson's time was almost up. The emergency message hit the DOJ operations desk at 10:47 that morning. A duty officer named Phillips saw the alert flash across his secure screen. He read it once, read it twice. Then his chair scraped back and he was on his feet. "We have a priority 1. Deputy Inspector General Underwood, unlawful detention, Granton, Virginia." Within 3 minutes, the phone lines caught fire. Special Agent Nora Caldwell was the first call. She led the OIG Rapid Response Team based in Richmond, 90 minutes south of Granton on a normal day. She made it in 55. But she wasn't waiting on herself alone. Her second call went to the FBI field office in Norfolk. They were closer. They moved first. Her third call went to Denise Underwood. Byron's wife answered on the first ring. She had already seen the emergency alert on her phone. Her voice was calm, controlled. But beneath it was the cold steel of a woman who had spent 15 years as an attorney and knew exactly what to do. Denise made 2 calls in the next 4 minutes. The first to the DOJ Office of Professional Responsibility. The second to a senior contact at the ACLU. By the time she hung up, the legal machinery was already grinding into motion. Back in Granton, Swanson had no idea. He sat in the break room eating a sandwich. Holloway sat across from him, staring at his coffee, saying nothing. Dawson stayed at the front desk, fidgeting with his pen, glancing at the holding area where Byron sat alone on a metal bench. Still in his dress uniform, still silent, still calm. 32 minutes after the arrest, a low rumble rolled down Main Street. The kind of sound you feel before you hear. Deep, heavy, like distant thunder on a clear day. Dawson looked up from his desk. Through the front window, he saw them. 3 black Chevrolet Suburbans, federal plates, tinted windows. They rolled into the parking lot in a tight formation, slow and deliberate. One parked directly in front of the main entrance. The other 2 flanked the building on each side, engines idling, headlights on. 6 doors opened at once. 6 federal agents stepped out, tactical vests, bold yellow letters across their chests. Federal Agent, OIG, and FBI. Holstered sidearms, credentials displayed, faces set in stone. Special Agent Nora Caldwell walked through the front door of the Granton Police Department like she owned every brick in the building. She was 5'8", brown hair pulled tight, eyes sharp enough to cut glass. She moved with the kind of authority that doesn't ask for permission. She placed her badge flat on Dawson's desk. The sound of leather hitting wood echoed through the silent station. "I'm Special Agent Nora Caldwell, Department of Justice, Office of the Inspector General. You are currently holding Deputy Inspector General Byron Underwood in unlawful custody. Release him immediately." Dawson's face went white. His hand reached for the phone. He called the break room. "Derek, you need to come out here right now." Swanson walked out, still chewing his sandwich. He rounded the corner, saw the hallway lined with federal agents, and stopped dead. The sandwich hung in his hand. His jaw stopped moving. The color drained from his face in slow motion, like watching paint wash off a wall in the rain. Caldwell stepped toward him. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "Officer Derek Swanson, you detained, assaulted, and falsely arrested a senior federal law enforcement official. You conducted an illegal search of a government vehicle. You forcibly opened a classified federal briefcase. Every second that Deputy Inspector General Underwood remains in your custody adds to your criminal exposure. Do you understand what I'm telling you?" Swanson's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Caldwell didn't wait for an answer. She turned to Dawson. "Release him! Now!" 2 minutes later, Byron Underwood walked out of the holding area. His dress uniform was wrinkled from the metal bench. One medal was slightly crooked. His wrists had red marks from the handcuffs, but his back was straight. His chin was level. His eyes were clear. He stopped in the hallway, adjusted his jacket, straightened the crooked medal with 2 fingers. Then he looked at Swanson. He didn't say a word, didn't need to. The silence between them said everything. Swanson looked away first. Then the front door burst open again. Chief Ray Cummings stormed in, red-faced, sweating. He'd broken every speed limit in town getting here after Dawson's panicked call. He looked at the federal agents lining his hallway, at the black SUVs surrounding his building, at the letters on their vests. "This is my station! You can't just—" Caldwell cut him off with a single sentence. "Chief Cummings, your department receives $1.2 million annually through a federal COPS grant. That places you under federal oversight jurisdiction. As of this moment, I am opening a preliminary investigation into civil rights violations, unlawful detention, assault, and evidence tampering within your department. I strongly advise you to retain legal counsel." Cummings' mouth closed. His shoulders dropped. He looked around the room at his officers, at Swanson, at the man in the wrinkled dress uniform standing quietly in the hallway with red marks on his wrists. And for the first time in his career, Chief Ray Cummings had absolutely nothing to say. The hunter was now the hunted, and the whole station knew it. Everything unraveled fast, like pulling one thread from a cheap suit and watching the whole thing fall apart. Within the hour, Chief Cummings made a decision. Not out of conscience, out of survival. He turned to Swanson, standing in the middle of his own station surrounded by federal agents, and said the words every officer dreads. "Badge and gun, on the desk, now." Swanson blinked. "Chief, I was doing my—" "Badge, gun, desk, don't make me say it again." Swanson's hands trembled as he unclipped his holster. The weapon landed on the desk with a dull thud. The badge followed. It slid across the wood and stopped face up. The silver shield caught the fluorescent light. 12 years on the force, 20 years of unchecked power, over in 12 seconds. Cummings turned to Holloway next. "You're on immediate administrative leave, pending investigation. Go home. Don't talk to anyone. Don't post anything. Don't leave town." Holloway nodded once. He didn't argue. He didn't look at Byron. He just walked out the back door like a man who already knew his life had changed forever. Then Cummings tried to save himself. He approached Byron in the hallway, away from the agents, away from the cameras. He lowered his voice to something that was probably meant to sound sincere. "Mr. Underwood, I want you to know that I am deeply sorry for what happened today. This doesn't represent our department. This was one officer acting on his own. I had no knowledge of—" Byron stopped him. Not with anger, not with a raised voice, with truth. "Chief, your apology isn't for me. It's for every person in this town your department has mistreated while you looked the other way. You had 6 complaints against that officer. 6! And you buried every single one." Cummings opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out that was worth saying. Byron continued. "You didn't fail today, Chief. You failed 6 times before today. Today just happened to be the day it caught up with you." Cummings stepped back. His face was gray. He looked 10 years older than he had that morning. Meanwhile, Swanson was falling apart. In the first 20 minutes after being stripped of his badge, he cycled through every stage of denial. First came defiance. "I was doing my job. He matched the description." But there was no description, no dispatch record, no 911 call, nothing. Then came blame. "Holloway should have said something. He saw the badge too. Why am I the only one getting punished?" Then came the excuses. "I've been under a lot of stress. 12 years on the street does things to a man. I need help, not punishment." Then his union representative arrived, a thick man in a rumpled blazer named Garrett Davis. He walked in ready to fight, ready to defend his officer the way he'd done dozens of times before. He sat down with Swanson, listened for 3 minutes, then asked to see the evidence summary that Caldwell's team had already prepared. He read it in silence. Body cam footage confirmed. Multiple civilian videos secured. Federal credentials verified. Classified materials tampered with. False police report filed. Davis set the paper down, looked at Swanson, and went pale. "Derek, I'll be honest with you, this is beyond anything I can negotiate. You need a criminal defense attorney. Today." Swanson's defiance cracked. His lip trembled. For the first time all day, the man who had strutted across that parking lot like he owned the world looked exactly like what he was. A man drowning in consequences of his own creation. While Swanson crumbled inside the station, the story was already exploding outside of it. Pastor Elijah Moore posted his video at 2 that afternoon. By 6, it had 500,000 views. By midnight, it crossed 2 million. The headline wrote itself and burned across every screen in America. "Cop slaps decorated black veteran in uniform. Turns out he's a top DOJ official." Local news arrived first. Vans with satellite dishes parked along Main Street. Then national outlets called. CNN, MSNBC, Fox, AP, Reuters. Everyone wanted the story. Everyone wanted the footage. And everyone got it. That evening, Byron sat in his mother's kitchen, the same kitchen where he'd eaten breakfast that morning, the same table where he'd done homework as a boy. He called Denise. Then he called his mother into the room. He told her everything. She didn't speak for a long time. Then she cried. Not about the memorial he missed, not about the flowers that were destroyed. She cried because her son, her baby boy who she raised in this town, who served his country, who dedicated his life to justice, had been humiliated on the same streets where he learned to ride a bicycle. Byron held her hand. "Mama, this is exactly why I do what I do." She squeezed his fingers tight. "Then you make sure it means something, baby. You make sure it counts." He nodded, and he meant it. Byron kept his mother's words close. Make sure it counts. And what followed over the next several weeks proved that it did. Within 72 hours of the incident, the DOJ Office of the Inspector General opened a full pattern or practice investigation into the Granton Police Department. Not just into Swanson, not just into one bad Saturday morning, into the entire department. Every policy, every complaint, every use of force report filed in the last 10 years. And what they found was exactly what Byron suspected. Swanson's 6 prior complaints weren't isolated incidents. They were symptoms of a department that looked the other way, of a system designed to protect its own. 3 additional victims came forward in the first week alone. All black men, all stopped without cause, all humiliated, all filed complaints, all ignored. One man named Gerald Dawkins told investigators he was pulled over by Swanson 2 years earlier, held for 48 hours on fabricated drug charges. His car was torn apart on the side of the road. Nothing was found. The charges were dropped. But no one ever apologized. No one ever investigated. Gerald lost his job because he missed 2 days of work while sitting in a cell for a crime that never happened. Another man, 26-year-old Chris Bellamy, described being stopped on foot while walking home from a night shift at a warehouse. Swanson threw him against a fence, called him a name that no person should ever be called, searched him without consent, found nothing, let him go with a warning. A warning for what, Chris never understood. These stories poured in, one after another, different names, different dates, same officer, same pattern, same silence from the department. The investigation widened, and then the grand jury was called. 3 weeks after the parking lot incident, a federal grand jury convened in Richmond, Virginia. The evidence was overwhelming. Body camera footage from Holloway's chest camera showed every second of the confrontation in high definition. The slap, the shove, the illegal search, the forced opening of a classified federal briefcase. Swanson's own words captured in perfect audio. Pastor Moore's cell phone footage provided a second angle, Wide, unshaken, damning. It showed what the body cam couldn't, the full scope of the scene. Byron's total compliance, the gathering crowd. The other officers were standing in formation, doing nothing. The grocery store's exterior security camera delivered the third angle, a wide overhead shot capturing the entire parking lot. Every movement, every moment. From the instant Swanson's cruiser pulled in to the moment Byron was shoved into the back seat. 3 cameras, 3 angles, one undeniable truth. The grand jury returned indictments in less than 2 hours. Officer Derek Swanson was indicted on 5 federal charges: deprivation of civil rights under color of law, assault on a federal officer, unlawful search and seizure, tampering with classified federal materials, filing a false police report. Each charge carried significant prison time. Combined, they represented decades behind bars. Officer Trent Holloway was indicted as an accessory, failure to intervene during a civil rights violation, complicity in unlawful detention. His silence in that parking lot, the silence he chose again and again, was now a federal crime. Chief Ray Cummings faced a separate administrative inquiry for systemic negligence, suppression of civilian complaints, and failure to maintain constitutional policing standards. He was forced to resign before the inquiry was even completed. He walked out of the Granton Police Department for the last time carrying a cardboard box. No ceremony, no handshake, no flag. The trial began 6 weeks later. United States versus Swanson, Federal Courthouse, Richmond, Virginia. Judge Catherine Prescott presiding. The courtroom was packed, standing room only. National media filled the gallery. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but sketch artists captured every moment, every expression, every crack in Swanson's composure. The prosecution opened with the body camera footage, 12 minutes of unedited video played on a large screen. The courtroom sat in absolute silence. Jurors watched Byron being shoved against the hood, watched the slap, heard the words, saw the metals scraping against hot metal. One juror, a woman in the front row, covered her mouth. Another looked down at his hands. Then the grocery store footage played. The wide shot. From above, Byron standing alone against 4 officers, his hands on the hood, surrounded, compliant, and still treated like a criminal. The prosecution called its witnesses: Pastor Moore, the teenager from the sedan, Gerald Dawkins, Chris Bellamy. One by one, they took the stand and told the truth. Each story was different. Each story was the same. Then Byron took the stand. He wore a dark suit. No uniform this time. No medals. Just a man. He stated the facts. Every detail. Every word. Every moment. Calm. Measured. Precise. The courtroom was silent enough to hear the scratch of the stenographer's keys. Then he paused, looked at the jury, and said something that no one in that courtroom would ever forget. "I have served this country in combat zones. I have walked through minefields. I have faced enemy fire. I have held soldiers as they died. But I have never felt more endangered than I did that Saturday morning. In my own hometown, wearing the uniform I bled for, at the hands of a man who swore the same oath I did, to protect and serve." The courtroom was still. A juror wiped her eyes. The sketch artist's hand stopped moving. Even the judge paused for a moment before asking the prosecution to continue. Swanson took the stand in his own defense. His attorney tried to build a case around protocol and reasonable suspicion, but under cross-examination, it fell apart in minutes. "Officer Swanson, can you produce the dispatch record for the suspicious vehicle report you cited?" "No." "Can you name the person who called in the report?" "No." "Was there in fact any report at all?" Silence. "Officer Swanson, was there a report?" "No." That single word sealed his fate. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. They returned with a verdict that echoed across the country. Guilty. On all 5 counts. Judge Prescott delivered the sentence 2 weeks later. She looked at Swanson across the courtroom and spoke without a trace of sympathy. You were entrusted with a badge and a weapon and the public's trust. You used all three as instruments of cruelty. You targeted a man because of his race. You fabricated a justification. You ignored his rights, his credentials, and his dignity. And when given every opportunity to stop, you chose to escalate. Derek Swanson was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. No possibility of early parole on the civil rights charges. Lifetime ban from law enforcement anywhere in the United States. Trent Holloway received 3 years. His law enforcement certification was permanently revoked. The courtroom erupted. Outside on the courthouse steps, the crowd that had gathered, hundreds strong, broke into applause. Some cried, some hugged, some simply stood in silence, feeling the weight of a moment that had been a long time coming. But justice didn't stop at the courtroom doors. The Department of Justice issued a federal consent decree over the Granton Police Department. Mandatory federal oversight for 5 years. Required bias training for every officer. Strict body camera compliance. An independent civilian review board with real authority. The federal cops grant, $1.2 million, was placed under probationary review. And the Granton City Council, in a unanimous vote, issued a formal public apology to Byron Underwood and to every resident who had suffered under a department that chose silence over accountability. The gavel had fallen, and this time it fell on the right side. 1 month later, Byron Underwood drove back to Granton, Virginia. Same highway, same exit, same small town with the rocking chair porches and the barbershop that closes at noon. But something was different this time. Not the town, the air. Byron parked his Tahoe outside the Granton Veterans Memorial Park, a small green space at the edge of town with a stone monument listing the names of every local soldier who gave their life in service. Terrence Williams was the newest name etched into that stone. Byron stepped out of the car. He wore his Army dress uniform. Same jacket, same medals, same polished shoes. The same uniform that had been shoved against a burning hood. The same medals that had scraped across hot asphalt. He wore them again, not out of defiance, out of love. The same love that brought him here the first time. The memorial was small. 40 or 50 people gathered on the grass. Veterans from every branch. Black, white, Latino, young and old. Some in uniform. Some in jeans and baseball caps with faded military patches. All standing together. All equal. Pastor Elijah Moore led the ceremony. His voice carried across the quiet park like a hymn. He spoke about sacrifice, about brotherhood, about the cost of freedom and the men and women who paid it without hesitation. Byron laid a bouquet of white lilies at the base of the monument, the same flowers he'd tried to bring a month ago, the ones that ended up crushed under a boot in a grocery store parking lot. This time he placed them gently against the cool stone. He pressed his hand flat against Terrence's name, held it there, closed his eyes. When the ceremony ended, people came to Byron, not as strangers approaching a famous man, as neighbors, as family. They shook his hand. They hugged him. An elderly woman who had known his mother for 40 years kissed him on the cheek and whispered, "Welcome home, baby." Then a boy appeared, maybe 10 years old, brown skin, big eyes, a Captain America t-shirt 2 sizes too big. He tugged at Byron's sleeve. "Are you the man from the video?" Byron knelt down so they were eye to eye. He smiled. "I'm just a man who didn't give up." The boy thought about that for a second. Then he said, "My daddy says you're a hero." Byron shook his head gently. "Your daddy's wrong. Heroes aren't the people who never get knocked down. Heroes are the people who get back up and make sure it doesn't happen to someone else." The boy nodded, slowly, like he was storing that answer somewhere deep. That evening, Byron sat on his mother's front porch. The sun was setting behind the tree line, orange and gold spilling across the sky, crickets starting their evening chorus, a glass of sweet tea sweating in his hand. His mother sat beside him in her rocking chair. Neither of them spoke for a long time. They didn't need to. Some moments are too full for words. Then Byron looked out across the street where he grew up, where he rode his bike, where he dreamed about becoming something bigger than this town. And he thought about what it all meant. Not just for him, for everyone. That morning, Byron said quietly, Officer Swanson didn't see my medals. He didn't see my service. He didn't see 20 years of sacrifice or the lives I've saved or the oath I swore. He saw what he wanted to see, and for him, that was enough to justify everything he did. He took a sip of tea, set the glass down. But here's what he didn't count on. The system that was supposed to protect him is the same system I've spent my career strengthening. And that day, it worked. Not because of who I am, not because of my title or my badge. It worked because the evidence was undeniable, because the witnesses were brave, because people refused to look away, because the law still means something when good people demand that it does. He paused, watched a firefly blink in the dark yard. I think about the men and women who go through what I went through, but who don't have a badge in their pocket, who don't have a team on speed dial, who don't have cameras rolling or pastors watching or federal agents 90 minutes away. That's who we fight for. Not revenge. Never revenge. Justice. Real justice. The kind that changes things. And now I'm talking to you. If this story made you feel something, share it. Not for us. Not for views or numbers. For the people who need to hear it. The people who have been slapped and shoved and silenced and told that their rights don't matter. Drop a comment below. Tell us, do you believe accountability in policing has gotten better or worse? We want to hear your voice. Every comment matters. And if you haven't already, subscribe. Hit that bell, because every week we bring you stories where justice isn't just an idea, it's a verdict. Now let me leave you with one final question. Think about it carefully. If Byron Underwood hadn't been a federal official that day, if he was just a regular man in a uniform buying flowers for his mother, do you believe justice would have still been served? Think about that tonight.
Swanson, 8 years, federal prison. His partner, 3. The chef gone. The whole department under federal control for 5 years, all because one cop saw a black man in uniform and decided he didn't belong. Here's what Byron's story really taught me. First, this man walked through my fields in Afghanistan, served 20 years, and he told the court the most dangerous place I ever stood was a grocery store parking lot in my own hometown. No middle on your chest changes what some people see when they look at your skin. Second, Swanson flicked Byron's bronze star like a toy. He didn't just disrespect one man, he disrespected every soldier who ever served. Prejudice doesn't just blind you to a person, it blinds you to everything they represent. Third, 6 people filed complaints against Swanson before Byron, all buried, all stamped unfounded. It took a deputy inspector general with a federal panic button to bring him down. Why did Byron get justice but those 6 didn't? A system that only protects you when you have power isn't justice, it's privilege. So be honest, if Byron was just a regular man buying flowers for his mama that morning, would anyone have come? Have you ever been treated like you didn't belong somewhere that was already yours? Tell me your story in the comments. Share this, like, and subscribe. And remember, respect isn't something you earn with medals. It's something every person deserves the moment they walk through the door.